Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast with this week's guest, Wendy Garvin Mayo. Wendy is a passionate board-certified nurse practitioner with 20 plus years of experience in healthcare in various sectors, such as clinical, leadership, research, academia, and pharmaceuticals. Ms. Mayo launched into nurse entrepreneurship as a stress solutions strategist, emotional intelligence consultant, international speaker, and certified John Maxwell coach and trainer. Wendy is the founding CEO of the Stress Blueprint, the #1 stress management coaching and consulting firm for nurses and healthcare professionals. So let's welcome Wendy to the show. Welcome to the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast, brought to you by The Nurse Speak, a show where we rally some of our nation's greatest nurse leaders, educators, experts, and advocates to tackle some of our greatest challenges that the nursing profession faces. My name is Damian Jenkins, and I'm your host for this show. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn that nurses can do anything. Okay, Wendy, thank you so much for being on the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to the listeners? Let them know a little bit about yourself, where you started in nursing, and where you are today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you and the listeners. My name is Wendy Garvin Mayo. I am a nurse practitioner. I started my career way back in 2004, med surg, like many of us start, and I've had multiple positions, long-term care. Oncology is where my heart is, though, and I'm still there, and we'll get there. But I did ER. I was an administrator, assistant director of nursing. Right now, I work for a pharmaceutical company in oncology research.
Okay.
So I do research for a pharmaceutical company. But outside of that, I'm also a nurse entrepreneur. So I have my own business as well.
Nice. All right, nurses running businesses. Isn't that amazing? Awesome. So
Absolutely.
Wendy, you've done a lot. And right now you say you're nurse practitioner and you're working in a pharmaceutical and you're focusing on medicines for oncology. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about that, because there's a lot of nurses who are probably listening to the podcast that don't really understand how to enter into the pharmaceutical space, whether they're a nurse practitioner or not. I know of several over my career. I've learned of many, and it's very interesting how to get into that setting. So just talk briefly about how did you get into the pharmaceutical space?
Yeah, so the pharmaceutical space, I call it a non-traditional nursing role, and it's something that I believe schools of nursing need to incorporate into the curriculum, that nursing is so much wider than the bedside. I think we focus on clinical, which is very important because it's foundational, but the pharmaceutical industry is a non-traditional role. The way I got into the pharmaceutical industry is I was working in an outpatient oncology clinic as a nurse practitioner. And my drug representative, they're the ones who come and educate us on the different chemotherapies. He's the one that saw something in me to say I would be a good medical science liaison. I had no idea what that was, because my perception, like many of us, think of pharmaceuticals, think of just sales, right? Like selling drugs, but it wasn't that. So I did some research. And the medical science liaison role was more research focused, really developing and cultivating relationships with KOLs or key opinion leaders, oncologists. So I did some research. I applied. A position was open here in Connecticut, and I got the position. And to be honest with you, I was not happy that I got the position because I was working my dream job, right? As an outpatient oncology nurse practitioner. So I had some conversations with my attendings, and they were supportive of me at least trying, right? You can always go to pharmaceutical. If you don't like, you can always come back to clinical. And I have to tell you, it was one of the best decisions of my life to leave clinical practice, to go into the pharmaceutical industry, because I was able to utilize my skills in a different way. And I was also able to discover other skills that I didn't know I had. I was able to be innovative, strategic. It was so fun. It was
Yeah.
so fun to be a nurse in the pharmaceutical industry. It was great, though. It was a great decision.
Yeah, I've always found that when nurses are allowed to utilize their skill set and their expertise in non-traditional ways, the excitement and creativity and innovation really kind
Mhm.
of pushes us to think outside of the box. And then sometimes we're able to take that newfound excitement and or skill set and bring it back to the clinical setting in the form of leadership, in the form of education, even in the form of direct patient care services. It's really cool that if organizations, especially starting in academia, can tap into that creativity and innovation early on, I think we would have a lot more career satisfaction in the initial steps of our nursing practice. I think that would be really a driver for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you said a word there
Yeah.
because if nurses have that ability, right? So
Mhm.
pharmaceutical industry didn't instill that in me. It was already in me.
Right.
How do we tap into it, even if not in nursing, but at the bedside?
Right.
How do you tap into those skills that can innovate and amplify what we do at the bedside? So I think even nurse leaders, it's really important to hear that.
Mhm.
Like, what talent, untapped talent do you have on your unit that you're not tapping into?
Yep. It's so easy to just focus on the med passes, the treatments, the
Yeah.
documentation, and just kind of, drive in those key points. But, as a leader myself in the healthcare industry for the last 11 of the 14 years that I've been a registered nurse, I find myself constantly assessing and evaluating my team members to figure out where are they going to shine best, right? I really believe in strengths based leadership, and so I don't want to set any of my colleagues up for failure. So once I identify where their key strengths are, then we put them in the positions where they're going to thrive. And bedside isn't always the space, right? Sometimes nurses do better in charge nurse roles or in leadership roles or in education roles or even in administrative roles. So it really
Mhm.
just depends on if you are taking the time to identify those strengths and those weaknesses and working closely with people to make sure we improve in the areas where they need to improve and then really hone those strengths that they have and let them shine with those, right?
Yeah, I love that. And you said something that I want to kind of hone in on.
Mhm.
You as a nurse leader take the time to do this.
Correct.
So we have to evaluate who are the nurse leaders, right? Because nurse leaders, I feel like in nursing, many times people are promoted to leadership position based on convenience, many times,
And
not because of
scarcity.
skill.
And scarcity. Oh, I've seen it
Yes.
too many
Yes.
times. We need a unit
Yes.
manager, so you're the one. And we're like,
Yes.
whoa, wait a minute. I have no desire nor training to effectively
Correct.
be a unit manager, and you're pushing me into that position. And a lot of people fail that way, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
But it
So
trickles down. It trickles down to the people on the unit. They're not able to do what you just said,
absolutely.
right? Tap into those strengths.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. So, all right. So you've done a lot, you've seen a lot, you've been in almost every possible position, traditional positions as a nurse and as a nurse practitioner in some non-traditional roles, even for nurse practitioners, right? You even stepped out of the box for that traditional model. So you've seen a lot. You've probably seen a lot of challenges. You probably are currently experiencing challenges in the nursing profession as a whole. So let's talk about it. What is the thing that you've identified as a major barrier to nursing excellence that you personally decided to take action on?
So stress and burnout, but I'm going to say stress,
Yeah.
workplace stress specifically.
Hmm.
It's something that was really amplified and highlighted during COVID.
Hmm.
However, we were already dealing with a lot of stress, strain, burnout, however you want to label it,
Right.
as nurses. And it's a problem because when we are stressed, we are not thinking straight.
Correct.
Not only for the care that we provide to our patients, but for ourselves,
Mm.
right? that untapped talent, that untapped innovation. Stress, I see stress as a lid to our ability to flourish and operate at our optimal levels as nurses.
Right. Absolutely. Again, as a leader and educator and constant mentor for nurses in the profession, whether it's for an organization or through my own business, stress does seem to be the number one thing that gets folks to shut down, to not think clearly. It's the thing that makes them make mistakes or make rash decisions in, deciding they're going to flee or fight. And sometimes fleeing is not the best idea because it just, creates to the vicious cycle of short staffing and inconsistencies within processes and protocols and continuity of care, or fighting, which sometimes brings out unprofessional behavior, strained workplace culture, ineffective teamwork ability, those types of things. And so, finding ways to manage that stress and or collectively from the top down, create an environment where there's less stress, I've found to be transformational. So let's talk about what you're doing for that.
Yeah, so I am the CEO of the Stress Blueprint, and we have the Stress Blueprint Academy, where we really help nurses alleviate stress by leveraging emotional intelligence.
Nice.
And why do we do that? Because, the first pillar of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. It's nurses really getting in tune with who they are, not who they're just operating as, but who are you? Take a pause, figure out, where are you? Do you want to be there? How did you get there? And where are you going? And how are you going to get to where you're going? So we do a lot of self-reflection to really figure out, where are we? Who are we? What do we want? What are these stressors? What are strategies that I have? What do I possess? What do I need? Right? How do I operationalize it? So we do a lot of that self-reflection work. And that's the first part of it. Right. Then figure out, who am I? How do I want to show up in the world? How are you showing up in the world? Right. And I think as nurses, we identify ourselves as the nurse. There's so much more than that. And you have to be aligned. I think sometimes when we're stressed, we get misaligned. Right. And we don't even realize it.
Absolutely.
And I think, with stress, we wear it as a badge of honor. We think the more stressed we are, the more we think we're doing, which is not the case.
No, that's baloney. It's
it's
baloney. And I've never understood the badge of honor of stress, anxiety, overwhelm, the burden of doing too many things. If I'm not working, I'm not being productive. That's all garbage. It's propaganda. It's been fed to us throughout generations. And, there's something to be said about a hard worker or someone that is constantly working on their goals. Fine. But it doesn't need to be an overwhelm, right? We can work on our goals and achieve great things and make lots of money and be an author and an entrepreneur and, kick-ass CEO of an organization or an amazing leader for an organization and not have to be overwhelmed.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Yeah. However, it's ingrained in us. Think about our nursing journey, nursing school, stress, clinicals, stress, right? NCLEX, stress, first job, stress. In that sequence, there's no one saying take the pause to figure out how to take care of yourself, how to mitigate stress. No one's talking about stress, but we come into the workplace stress. So that's what we know, right? So now we're trying to shift and change the mindset around. Now, we're not saying you're going to be stress-free.
Sure.
However, it's knowing what to do when you are stressed so you can pivot, so you can tap into your brilliance, right? You can tap into innovation. You can inspire others. You can just do so much to really shift the profession, because so many nurses now don't even realize why they're in nursing. Why am I here? Right. All the good you felt when you were applying for the job. Now you have the job. Now you're just like, I hate being here.
Right. Is this really what I want to do?
Right.
How many times have we asked ourselves that over the years? Right. Is this really what I want to do? Right.
Yes. Yeah. So stress is huge. And I think people everybody is stressed. Stress is a thing. but it's something we have to really be mindful of as healthcare professionals because it impacts us mentally and physically. And you have to stop and do those checks because mentally, are we okay mentally? Right. And I always say with this pandemic, I feel like we are physically continuing to live and show up and do all the things, but mentally, where are we?
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that we do the work.
Yeah. So it sounds like self-awareness is the first step, right? So what would be after someone feels pretty aware of, moment to moment, their general self, what they like, what they don't like, what their triggers are, when they feel like they're starting to escalate, so then they can tap into that awareness and then, find ways to not get to a point of not being able to focus or allowing their emotions to get the best of them. What would be the next step?
The next step is how do you what's your next step in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So once you're aware and you can control yourself, right? So if you're up here and I need to come back down, so
Mm-hmm.
whatever you need to do, you need to do some breathing, you need to do some reading, you need to just pivot. Once you can come back down and you have control over that, the next step in emotional intelligence is being aware of others,
Yeah.
right? So once you're aware of yourself, you can control yourself. It's being aware of others, right?
Right.
So we're always in communication, interacting with patients, colleagues, but it's being aware with others and more importantly, not letting others trigger you. I call it giving your power away.
How about that? That's so powerful. Too often do we waste so much time and energy worrying about what other people are doing rather than focusing on how we're responding to what they're doing. Right. I
Mm-hmm.
tell everyone that, and I give examples, and I try to instill this wisdom into those who I train, coach, or mentor. And it's all about having the choice in response, and I tell everyone, when we have to write them up, right, because they were unprofessional, you had a choice in how you would respond in that moment. Sometimes you just have to take a deep breath, close your eyes, say a few words of encouragement, and then reset yourself before you respond. Because yes, we are emotional creatures and we can, allow our emotions to get the best of us if we're not aware of where we are in that moment and what our expectations are moving forward. If you're trying to establish a therapeutic relationship with a client, you're not going to retaliate in an unprofessional manner when they call you every name in the book because they're grieving or angry or frustrated,
Right.
right?
Right.
Same thing with our colleagues. Yes, our colleagues can rub us raw sometimes. It's like, that annoying sibling or family member, right? They can rub us raw. But if we respond in a negative or unprofessional way, then it's only going to make situations worse. And being
Yeah,
aware of
absolutely.
yourself, your triggers, and then also how to respond to others is very important. So I love that you mentioned that, being aware of others. And then also, how we're going to impact someone else in the way we respond as well. We might feel like we're retaliating or we feel like we have to retaliate because we're so upset. But how is that going to affect that other person? And if you do care, if you are an individual that wants peace and cooperative, collaboration and a good team, then you're going to be more thoughtful about how you're going to impact your colleagues. So that way we all get along, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Empathy is huge in
Mm-hmm.
that. And another thing we focus on in the Stress Blueprint Academy is a communication.
Yeah,
So once you have that, how do you effectively communicate? Right. And
right.
I always tell people, how do you want to show up in the world? How do you want people to see you in the world? What's your legacy you're leaving?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you want to leave a legacy where you're always disgruntled? People can't approach you, right? How do you want to show? And that's that work we do in that first pillar, like
Right.
self-awareness. Like, how do you want to show up? How are you showing up? But communication is huge because we feel things, we all get angry, but it's the how, not the what. I always say
Right.
it's how do you take the next step.
Right. So
So
it sounds like you've developed a really excellent, service to help not just nurses, because I'm sure this can be applicable to any profession, right? But, especially in nursing, where we have a very high pace, fast pace, high stress, high stakes type of daily interactions, right? Many of us on the front lines are saving lives. We're dealing
Mhm.
with intoxicated, patients, angry family members, a very stressed, interdisciplinary team. And so these can create a lot of high level emotional situations. But none of this is in training for nursing school. None of this is in training for onboarding in organizations. I think maybe some, executive level leaders might come across this type of training when they get to the C-suite, but it's probably far and few in between. This is essential, right? So some people would consider these skills soft skills, and I challenge everyone to eliminate the word soft skills from your vocabulary and change it to essential skills, because
Mhm.
these skills are foundational for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something there. It's not taught, but we have to really embed it into the culture.
Yeah.
I think a lot of organizations, they do like, oh, 60-minute webinar.
Mhm.
That's not going to really do anything,
No,
right?
right.
We have to shift the culture of healthcare
Mhm.
and nurses, and we have the power to do that.
Of
And
course.
that's something I don't think we understand the power we possess
Right.
because we're so ingrained in the stress and the burnout, we're bogged down, but we have the power.
Yep.
If a hospital doesn't have nurses, they don't have anything. They
Mhm.
cannot operate without us. So we have to understand what we bring, the power we possess, and how to utilize that power to shift the culture to make it better for us and the nurses coming behind us.
Right, absolutely. And I think one area that a lot of people struggle with is how to deal with that conflict, right? I think, for the most part across my years, I've seen people, they have good communication skills. They are thoughtful, they're intentional. They don't want to offend anyone, and so they're careful about their wording. But when they're faced with conflict, that seems to be when they struggle the most. That's where the emotions are at the highest. And if you have someone really being unprofessional towards you, a colleague, for instance, or even a subordinate, maybe someone you supervise, how do you handle that situation without getting emotional? This is where I find a lot of people struggle. And there winds up being some subjectivity that's, included in the decision making, which in my opinion is never appropriate. Would you give a recommendation for that?
Yeah. So I always say you don't have to respond in the moment.
Correct.
You don't have to respond in the moment. And I think this is where coaching and mentorship is so important. You
Hmm.
don't have to do this stuff alone. And I think as nurses, we want to be independent. We want to feel like we have to know, but we don't have to do any of this alone.
Hmm.
Right. So if you have a mentor, you have a coach, you need that. And that person does not have to work on your unit or in your institution,
Right.
but have that person you can lean on to say, hey, this is what's happening. Can you help me work through this?
Hmm.
Right? Help coach you or mentor you through. But you don't have to respond in a moment. Take a moment, take a pause and say, I can't have this conversation right now, or that's it. Leave it there.
Yeah.
You can come back when you're level headed and you're ready to respond in an appropriate way where you're going to show up the way you want to be seen, right?
Hmm.
Not giving your power away to address it.
Right.
Because many times when you have someone that is acting out towards you, it's not really about you.
Right. Of
And we
course.
have to understand that we can't take it personal,
Yeah.
but we don't have to be so reactive. And many times we just react and we say things and we don't mean, and it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy,
Right.
but it's possible to really navigate that situation in a positive way. But I
Absolutely.
think mentorship, coaching, community is so important in those situations.
Yeah, and I find that, in a multidisciplinary team or even within the nursing administration, right? We have a DON, ADONs, there might be several ADONs, unit managers, a whole bunch of, nursing leadership. I don't ever condone isolated incidences where one of the leaders makes the executive decision for the team, right? I really believe that we should all bring it back to the team. We should speak about it, with everyone because there's different perspectives and maybe someone has more information than the other. And so if there's going to be a discipline or if there's going to be a decision about, maybe shifting this person into a different role or whatever the case may be, I think it really should be a collective conversation. And I understand in big organizations, not every single issue can be brought back to the table. But when it's going to be a decision that impacts, someone's continuation in the organization or the role or promotion or any of these things, it should be brought to the team because, again, there's different perspectives and there's different thoughts and how to approach situations. And I just think the more the team is involved with making the decisions, the better the decisions wind up being.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to leadership.
Yeah.
What type of leadership you're under?
Yeah.
And is it a leadership that is conducive to helping you grow and expand and explore who you are and how you can really contribute to the profession? And I also, I always like to tell nurses that if you don't like it, be part of the change.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying
Be
that. I
part
say
of
that daily.
be part of the change,
Yeah.
not that I'm just disgruntled and you're making decisions without me, but say, hey, can I have, a 15-minute meeting with you, right? After the situation, right? And go back and talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk about it and see if you can come together to make that situation better next time. Now, not saying it's going to work, but then decisions have to be made, right? To say, is this
Right.
leadership I want to be under?
Right.
But I always encourage nurses to be part of the change. Don't be so disgruntled, right? Pull that person to the side and say, let's have a conversation about this, you know?
Absolutely.
This should be your leadership too. And I'm a true believer that all nurses are leaders. Everyone has some leadership ability.
Yes.
But really to speak up, advocate. We always talk about advocacy in nursing school, but we have to advocate not for only for our patients, but for ourselves and our colleagues.
Right.
Right. So that's part of it.
Absolutely. I say that daily. So again, thank you for saying that. Be part of the solution. And, for those of us who are in the trenches on the front lines, sometimes it's hard to imagine, having the time and or energy to be part of the solution, but it doesn't have to be a major contribution. Little things, very little things on a daily basis, and then over time will build to a major transformation. That's all you need. So take that pause, take that deep breath before you respond and smile. That alone can change an entire interaction. Take a moment to answer, call bells for the CNAs. I know you're pulling meds right now or whatever you're doing, but take a moment and take the initiative and go answer the call bell and show that you're trying to be of assistance to everyone, not just your specific responsibilities that you've been, assigned. There's just little things we can do on a daily basis that is going to create a positive environment for our workspaces and our teams. And yes, come back to leadership and make recommendations. It's one thing to point out all of the things that are wrong or all of the things that are missing, and those things are important to communicate, but make suggestions, right? See what you can do to be a part of the solution by saying, hey, I've noticed that our vital sign machines break frequently. If we have manual blood pressure cuffs and stethoscopes on every cart and maybe a individual pulse oximeter, that would make our job so much easier and we wouldn't get so frustrated when the vital sign machine breaks, right? Making recommendations for ways to get around some of the barriers that your organization might have, because some organizations are struggling financially and they can't buy a new vital sign machine every time something breaks. They have to wait on parts or they have to wait for a technician to come out and fix it. But, just be part of the solution instead of always just pointing fingers and saying administration doesn't care about us. The organization is out to get us. It's easy to fall into that mindset. At one point early in my career, I thought the same thing. But, now being on the other side of it, it's like, wait, this isn't true at all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And something I always, tell nurses to do is once you bring the solution, it's like, what can we do? Not you, but
Yes.
the wording is very important. So like you said,
Yes.
the blood pressure machine is breaking down. I think we should do X, Y, or Z to make it better. What can we do? What's the next steps we can take to
Right.
help mitigate this? Not what are you gonna do? What are
Right.
y'all gonna do? Right.
And you've
So
heard that plenty times, I'm sure. So
oh yeah,
you need to do this or you need to
yes,
do that. And I'm like,
yes.
I personally don't have to do anything. However, I'm willing to be of assistance. So let's talk about how we can manage the situation. Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I want to say something to the effect of when you were talking about helping out with call bells and
Hmm.
all of that.
Yeah.
We have to keep the patients front and center
Absolutely.
in everything
Always.
we do.
Yes.
And as nurses, how we operate in the clinical in any setting is really a part of your personal brand. I want you to
Mhm.
think about that. I remember
Mhm.
being a nurse, even a nurse practitioner. I was never too good to turn a patient, to put a patient on a bedpan. To this day, if I go in, I'll put a patient on the bedpan. I'll clean a patient. No, but
Absolutely.
it's part of your brand. How do you want your brand to stick out? How do you want people to remember you, right?
Mhm.
As a team player, a call bell, changing the bedpan, doing vital signs. That is a job for a nurse,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't mean a nurse or a nursing assistant. We're all here for the patient,
Absolutely.
right? That's why in our first clinical, we were a lot of us in long-term care facilities doing all of that because we
Yes.
have the ability to do that.
Yes.
So we have to cultivate our brand on the unit, off the unit, in conflict, out of conflict. But I want you to think about that. What is your brand? It's something that we don't think about as nurses, but what is your brand,
Yeah.
right?
Personal brand is so important. And I think the
It
one
is.
thing that helps your brand continue to grow and to be recognized is consistency,
Ooh,
right?
yes.
Consistency is key. You know, it's if you show up consistently daily and, have that same message, just like when I start a new role, if let's say I start a new role in an organization and I come in strong and confident and I'm helpful and I'm available and I'm present and I'm always, helping and creating solutions, I can't stop doing that one day. I have to
Right.
make sure that it's consistently woven throughout my roles and responsibilities so that way my brand stays strong and true and I'm creating that perception that I want folks to have about me. Some people say, I don't care if anyone likes me. I don't care to have friends. Well, sure, I'm not there to make friends. And honestly, at the end of the day, despite my efforts, if someone has a negative opinion about me, it's not going to bother me because I know what my intentions are and I know my goals and I know I'm consistent in the work that I deliver. So, you're not going to win everyone and not everyone's going to jive with you. And sometimes haters be hating, right? Right? There's nothing you could do about that. But consistency really is important. So I think everyone inherently wants to be a positive person. They want positive interactions. They want a team that works well together. They want to be able to provide for the patients. Um, but the struggle on a daily basis in a lot of settings is just palpable. And I think that the work you're doing is so important. And I think any person who is in charge of bringing in additional resources into their organization to help really transform their workplace should be reaching out to you. Absolutely. So, with that, Wendy, how can people get in touch with you?
You can get in contact with me. Go to stressblueprint.com and schedule a free consultation. Let's have a conversation. Let's see what you're
Awesome.
doing and what you need.
Awesome. And then where else can they find you on social?
You could find me on all social media at Wendy Garvin Mayo.
Okay.
Wendy Garvin Mayo. Yeah, you can find me.
Awesome.
I'm my name. Very easy.
Perfect. Awesome. So I'm going to have all of the ways that folks can connect with you in the show notes of this episode. And Wendy, thank you so much for coming on the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast, sharing your wisdom and your expertise with all of us. It's such important work, and I'm so very honored to have connected with you. I hope to see you at the National Nurses and Business Association conference that's going to be in July in Orlando. So if you just go to nursesbusiness.com, you'll be able to see all of the information. I don't think registration is open just yet, but they're still posting save the dates. And they're also calling for speakers, which is something that you might be interested in doing. So, because you have a lot of really amazing things to speak about. It is entrepreneurial focused, but it's also speaking to career alternatives for nurses, which makes it a very successful conference. And we always have such a good time. So, hopefully, I'll see you in Orlando.
Yes, I will definitely be there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on the show, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care. Bye. And that concludes episode 12 of season 3 of the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast with this week's guest, Wendy Garvin Mayo. We hope that everything that we shared for you in this episode will help you lead the charge and find ways to manage your stress so that way you can find the career and job satisfaction that you want and deserve. All the ways to connect with Wendy will be in the show notes of this episode. And as always, if you have any questions about anything we shared, please visit thenursespeak.com/contact and get in touch with me. I would love to have a conversation with you. So until next episode, take care, be well, and remember that nurses can do anything.